99.9% of the world does not know what agentic AI is. Recently came back from a trip, internationally, went to Vietnam and was talking to people there. They're not thinking about agentic AI. I don't even know what it is.
In your third company, Solvvy, that was acquired by Zoom. You are one of the first conversational AI companies.
I think Zoom had already signaled its intention to get into the customer experience and contact center space.
Tell us about working with Eric Yuan.
I wish I had worked for him 15, 20 years ago. Eric is a true force of nature as a founder. You would not believe that the CEO of a $32 billion market cap company agonizes about whether it takes 4 clicks to get to a feature that he thinks should only need 2. The one lesson that I want to leave with founders is power of radical transparency inside the business. And so what we said was, we will share everything with the employees except what somebody else makes.
You said that technology, unless you're a foundation model, cannot be the moat. If you have to summarize moat for the founder listening, how do they build those moats then?
So I think that
Hi, this is Siddharth Aluwalia. Welcome to The Neon Show. I'm your host and managing partner for Neon Fund, a fund that has invested in some of the best enterprise AI companies that started from India and building globally, like Atomic Works, Poddraft, CloudSec. Today I have with me Mahesh Ram. He's been a 3 times founder, sold all 3 companies to Fortune 500 companies. Mahesh, welcome to The Neon Show.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on the show. I've been watching episodes of the show and I thought I have to join this party. It sounds like a good party to join.
Thank you so much. And Mahesh, the special thing about you is, right, you have lived and breathed by ethos of, that you want to solve complexity for people and give them back their time. And you have done it across many different, use cases, be it customer service, be it education, tax, legal, like across, So where does this ethos come from that you have lived your entire life?
I think it's, as most things, as with most founders, I think comes from personal frustration. In the legal and tax space, the idea that before we built the expert systems, it used to take weeks for a company to incorporate itself and qualify to do business in all the 50 states in the US. Yeah. And a lot of it was people having to go to the state offices, do filings, multiple forms. Each of the states had their own forms. And it just seemed incomprehensible to me that you would need dozens of people and weeks of time to do this, when in fact the information was highly repetitive. Of course, it varied by case to case. So that frustration, I think, with seeing how things were done, and then when you actually dig in and understand why it's being done, there was actually no logical reason why that complexity existed, except that technology hadn't caught up to having a solution. Yeah. So once you see the technology coming and you see the complexity inherent, I think you have a tremendous opportunity to do that. In other cases, the complexity is extraneous. And let me give you an example. Today, as we speak, somewhere between 1.5 to 2 billion people in the world are trying to learn or improve their English.
Yeah.
How many of them have access to a native English teacher? Well, when we did GlobalEnglish, the second company, we realized that we would never fix the problem that somebody's going to get a live teacher when they need it. In China, Brazil, and we realized that global companies had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees in that situation. And they were sending people to local language schools and so on. So there's an inherent problem there. But language learning is difficult. It's complex. It takes a long time. So we thought, why don't we simplify this by having everything, on the internet available, highly prescriptive diagnostic, and actually compress the time, because most of the time was being spent saying, I have to schedule a class, next Friday I have to travel. All of that could be reduced. People could study every day, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So I think when you see those opportunities, you see, but that is only possible because we had the internet, we had voice, we had the ability to do detection. We built ASR early on before Siri, to understand language learning. So the technology catches up. And then similarly with AI, when we built one of the first conversational AI companies, it was because the technology caught up to the problem. So that's kind of what I think has been most exciting about destroying complexity and simplifying and giving people back time.
So in your journey, in your third company, Solvvy, that was acquired by Zoom. So you started in 2015. The company got acquired in 2022. You were one of the first conversational AI companies, and you were used by large companies like Amazon and many other Fortune 500, right? So what was, if you can go deep, what was the ethos of starting this company?
So I think the genesis of the story is that I was introduced by a common investor friend to the two PhD co-founders that I had at Solvvy, who had just finished their PhD at Carnegie Mellon in machine learning, robotics, AI. This is long before anybody was talking about AI. Nobody knew what it was. And they had come up with an approach in their academic careers that was doing question answering. So it could look at a huge corpus of unstructured text, and you could ask a question, a natural language question, and it would actually extract the right answer, as opposed to keyword search, which was all in vogue at the time with Google. It would actually extract the answer. So if you had a 15-page PDF about a lawnmower, as an example, and you asked, how do I fix the back rotor of the lawnmower? It would actually find the exact answer to that question in the corpus automatically. So when I saw the technology, I said, this is amazing, but we're probably not going to succeed against Google in the consumer space. But having been a CEO and realizing how many times our customers asked repetitive questions in customer support, I thought, why don't we just take all this available knowledge that companies have about their products and services and build something that can actually answer the L1, L2 type of questions very rapidly, instantaneously, using this technology that no one else had. And how do we put this in front of, the brands can put this in front of, between them and the consumer, and have a great experience. And so a lot of it was about designing the experience, not the technology. We had the technology, but it was about designing that experience to make it successful for the brand and also for the user. Because if the user is unhappy, the brand gets a bad reputation. If the brand not getting self-service rates that are valuable, they're not going to buy. So we really thought about design and how do we architect this. But that was the impetus, is using this new technology, AI and machine learning, which we had to build most of it ourselves, to be able to solve a problem that's been around for centuries, probably, or decades at least, which is repetitive questions that slow a business down.
Okay. And what is it for Zoom that they made the acquisition offer?
So I think I think Zoom had already signaled its intention to get into the customer experience and contact center space. Some months before we were acquired, they had made a bid for 5.9 that didn't happen, public company. And so it was clear after that Eric Yuan and the Zoom leadership was committed to building their own native solution for contact center.
Okay.
And they saw that as a space that Zoom should be in. Naturally, Zoom has many assets that lend themselves perfectly to that space. And so I think we had earlier done a proof of concept with Zoom as a potential customer. And so they had dug in deep with us and asked us lots of questions, and we had done a POC, and I thought, then they went silent, and we thought maybe we didn't do something right. Yeah. We were quite sure we had done a good job. So some months later, when we were in the cusp of raising a Series B, we asked Zoom and a couple of others, potential strategic investors, if they would like to participate in the round. And things happened very fast, as often happens, and we were not looking to be acquired. And Zoom said, we would like you to join the company. We'd like to add, this capability and really build out this contact center vision that we have. And one thing led to the other, and we were resistant at first, and then got more interesting because we thought the idea of bringing this at scale to the world was interesting. And today that product is now relabeled as Zoom Virtual Agent. It's part of the contact center business, which is one of the fastest growing lines of business at Zoom. Most people know meetings and Zoom Phone, but contact center is actually growing very, very rapidly.
So can you tell us more about that business, that you helped build?
Yeah. So my journey at Zoom has two different components. The first component is, replatforming Solvvy, our company, into Zoom Virtual Agent, become part of the contact center suite. The contact center suite has agent-facing solution, the self-service solution, which is Zoom Virtual Agent. It has workforce management, forecasting, scheduling agents, when does it be, and it has quality management. How do you manage performance?
They're selling to call centers.
Yes, and they're selling to big brands. So a good example would be Major League Baseball.
Okay.
Which uses Zoom Contact Center, And they also do replay with Zoom. If you see the video replay, it's powered by Zoom. So the actual contact center, all the ticketing, all of that, customer service is all powered by Zoom Contact Center. So that's one business that Zoom was building. So we were building that. When I joined, it hadn't yet launched. We were not GA. We joined other teams that were building other components, and we released the product. But about 8 months into, post the acquisition by Zoom, or 6 months after, ChatGPT and OpenAI releases ChatGPT. And so Eric was very ahead of his time. And so he realized that he needed to be, he was already well aware of what was going on in AI, and he knew something was happening. But he also knew that his biggest competitor, Microsoft, was deep in partnership with OpenAI. Yeah. So he said, we have to be great at this in order to win. And so he asked me to essentially take over as head of AI product at Zoom, independent of the contact center, more focusing on the core business of meetings, phone, the collaboration side of it. So really two different journeys, and continue to do that. And then I also managed a third business at Zoom, which was the Gong competitor, so Zoom Revenue Accelerator, which was a smaller business. But the AI was, for a lot of my time, was my main focus, was building the AI product lines.
Got it. And tell us about working with Eric Yuan, right? He's an immigrant founder, built one of the most legendary companies of our era, right? What was it working with him for 2.5 years?
The thing I tell founders, tell everyone I know, is that I wish I had worked for him 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I would have avoided some mistakes and done things differently. Eric is a true force of nature as a founder. He is able to, I think first and the most important thing that founders can learn from Eric is how incredibly focused he is on usability and user experience. To the extent that you would not believe that the CEO of a $32 billion market cap company agonizes about whether it takes 4 clicks to get to a feature that he thinks should only need 2, or that the settings on the things are too difficult for someone to find. And if someone writes in with a legitimate complaint, Eric will not only read it, he'll make sure it gets acted on, that it gets fixed, and that it's communicated back. I'm talking about an everyday user. You could write in, and if you tagged Eric, he would ask someone to investigate and fix it. You probably, I don't know how he does it, but it goes back to the core principle, which is his belief is, and why he built Zoom. He built Zoom because he was a lead architect at WebEx, and he believed that it was too complicated. And there were, how many meeting platforms were there when Eric built Zoom? So many. Skype and GoToMeeting and WebEx. But he said, no, this is all not good enough. It's not easy to use. I can't just turn it on. And the famous phrase about Zoom is the 3 words, it just works. You open up your machine, you know that it's going to work. Whereas Google Meet, Microsoft Teams all had lots of challenges. When you open the thing, it didn't always work the way you expected. So that all comes down to Eric. And so his intense focus on user experience and usability. And it's very difficult for founders to maintain that focus. He's doing it all these years later at a $30 billion company. So it is possible. And I think if you don't do that, then you run the risk of thinking that your business is in the right place and losing the market. So that's number one. Number two is his ability to predict the future, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, about the decisions he made with AI, is remarkably good. He is very plugged in. He's reading what's going on. He has a good sense of what's coming next. And he's able to take because he's a founder, and because he built this in his own vision, he's able to take bold decisions that would scare most public company CEOs, because he has conviction.
Can you share top 3 decisions that you know?
Yeah. So I'll give you the best ones. I think, when we were building AI Companion, we were in a race. We wanted to beat Microsoft to market, and we did beat Copilot to market by a couple of weeks. And about a month and a half before our launch, we were at that time, most of the market that was adopting early AI solutions, this is 2023, was using customer data to train models. They were using a single model like OpenAI or Anthropic or Llama. And they had very loose, I would say, security and governance. So one day, about a month and a half before our launch, we had built with the idea that we were going to use customer data to train the model and that we were going to charge for AI Companion. So imagine that we built everything for months and months at not sleeping, teams are awake all night, building. And about a month before the launch, Eric called couple of us into the office and said, I've made some decisions. And he said, what are the decisions? He said, number one, we're not going to charge for AI Companion. He said, what? We're going to monetize this. It's going to cost us money. We're going to be underwater margin-wise, And he said, no. He said, all these things will commoditize. The model cost will commoditize. It's our job to make it affordable. Everybody in the world should have AI. We're going to make it possible. That was a big, bold decision. Okay, number one. Number two, he said, I want to make a statement that we will never use customer data to train our AI models. Nobody was doing this in 2023, not even Microsoft. Microsoft was using chat data to train the model. And we said, Eric, please don't do that. We'll slow down our ability to be accurate, accuracy. And he said, okay, I'll think about it. The next morning, he posted on LinkedIn and said, we'll never use customer data to train the model. He made the decision. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions we ever made, because when enterprises looked at us, they had that confidence. Whenever they would say, how do we know that you won't? I said, our CEO has said it publicly on LinkedIn. He can't go back on his word. Number two. And number three, he also came up with this idea, which was very unique at the time. He made a decision that he said, we will not be reliant on any single foundation model company. So he said, instead of just building for OpenAI, we're going to build a federated AI layer, which we talked a lot about, where we can be agnostic and we can actually build a lot of work to do this, build evaluation, judge AI judges, to be able to use any of the best in-class models or our own models in some cases. So when we launched, we were using Llama, Anthropic, and OpenAI for different use cases. It's a lot of work. It could be much easier if we just picked one. Yeah. But he said, no, this is going to keep evolving. The world is going to change. And we don't want to be tethered to one player. Along the way, he also made another big, brilliant decision. He invested in Anthropic, which of course has turned out to be a very fortuitous thing. So, but these three decisions, the no use of customer data to train the model, they built not charging for AI Companion, and then doing the federated approach were brilliant. They were far ahead of everybody else in the market. So I think, that kind of bold decision-making, I think is, at the time where many people were arguing with him inside the company, why are you doing this? We need to monetize. He said, no, I see this is where we're going to be.
So one layer of this decision-making, I just want to understand why, so that our founders can know about it, right? Yeah. One comes from caring deeply about customer experience that you already shared. What are some of the other principles that Eric or Zoom follows that lead to this kind of decision-making? So I learned this lesson in the most difficult way. One of my first presentations to Eric, I came in with a deck and a few slides, and I started to talk to him about a problem in building AI Companion. And I went deep into the problem, and I was talking about all this stuff. And I could feel his impatience. And I could feel that it wasn't going well, basically. And he was getting frustrated. And none of the other executives in the room were saying anything to me about it. And so I didn't understand. And at some point, at the end, he said, I don't know what to do with this. And so I said, Eric, what do you mean? And he said, I would like you to tell me the problem, the root cause, and the solution. He said, many people come with a problem. Some people come with a problem and the root cause, why? But then don't have a solution. He said, that doesn't make good use of my time. He said, the best use of my time is when someone goes deep, truly understands the problem, truly understands the root cause, and actually has a solution to offer. When you have all those things, you come and present to me, you do it in this template, in this format, our meeting will go, in 10 minutes, we can have a decision. So I said, okay. So I went back, and the next meeting, I thought I have it perfectly. And so I went back and I came with a beautiful problem, root cause solution. And then I got to the thing is like, ownership and who's going to do it. And I had 4 names. I had owners, for this, and this. And I had, for dates, I said, subject to scoping. I put something in there, but because I wasn't sure. Yeah. And he said, okay, you got the first part, right? Problem, root cause, solution, but you missed owner and date. Yeah. And he said, when I want ownership, I want a single owner. It doesn't mean the person should do all the work. This is the best lesson for founders. It doesn't mean the person should do all the work. The best employees you have ownership. Yeah. Ownership means you are going to drive it to conclusion. And he said, I want your name on it.
I don't want 5 names on it. You can sub-assign, and you can give them single ownership of a particular task, but I need you to be the owner. And then he said dates. He said, I don't even mind if you have a date for a date. If you say in 3 weeks, I will give you the launch date, that's okay. But in 3 weeks, I better have the date. But these 5 things, it's easy. The five fingers of one hand: problem, root cause, solution, owner, date.
Yeah.
And I think this sounds very formulaic. When you think about it, it sounds very formulaic. It sounds like something you read in a book. But when you actually watch it and apply it, and founders, if they use it with their employees, what you'll find is that the behavior becomes predictable, and people are following a pattern that they can then use efficiently with each other, right? And so it's like the Amazon memo. It's a concept, right? There's nothing magical about the memo, but what the memo does is create a construct that all the employees of a startup, for example, can coalesce around and can get their work done more efficiently. Stand-ups go better. Big decisions get done in a more methodical fashion. You know why. You have to go back and you can look at the root. If something fails, you can go back and say, what was the problem, root cause, solution? Oh, we got the root cause wrong. Why did we get the root cause wrong? We didn't do enough research. All of these artifacts get created, and they actually are valuable if you go back and read them. So I think that is something that, the founder in you thinks you just have to move fast, break things. Process is bad, but this isn't really process. This is a mental alignment. And so I think I strongly encourage all the founders I work with and advise and invest in to adopt principles similar to this. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. That helps, definitely.
The one lesson that I want to leave with founders is, and I had to learn this lesson, was the power of radical transparency inside the business. I used to, until maybe a year and a half into Solvvy, until then, we used to guard information. Didn't tell everybody everything. Oh, I don't know, we'll, have enough cash, our runway of cash, or, when we expect to raise money, or how we're doing against our milestones for the quarter, all these kinds of numbers. And we kind of came to an epiphany that I want every founder to think about deeply, which is radical transparency actually isn't a risk. It's actually an unburdening of your stress. And so what we said was, we will share everything with the employees except what somebody else makes. We didn't go that far. There are companies that have even done that. I think that has too many other risks, because you then have to explain why somebody in Detroit is making less than some Bay Area and is doing the same job. It's a waste of time.
But that's going to a very emotional level.
Yeah,
that's subjective.
Exactly. It's
not objective.
But everything else, we said our cash balance. What did we have to do this quarter? Why did we fail? What were the mistakes I made? What were the mistakes our management team made? Or what was things? Celebrating the wins. It suddenly became this
freedom,
beautiful experience of thinking that truly all of these people are owners. And so it's very difficult. And I particularly find it that with Indian origin founders and founders from India, that some of them are great at this and some of them are just really hoard information and try to keep it. And I tell them all, you will be better off if you adopt radical transparency. You might tune it a little differently for your business than somebody else. That's up to you. But you'll never be harmed. Don't worry that somebody's going to leave and go to your competitor and take that information. By the time information is useful to that competitor, you will have done something else. So I think that's one of the biggest stress relievers, was adopting that principle.
And let's say if you were starting today, Solvvy or any other problem, what would you have done differently?
Well, obviously, I think the technology framework is completely different. I think the idea of automating everything and starting out with no manual process. I mean, that's a self-evident, obvious principle. I think but it requires a radical shift in the way you think about building companies. So I think that is inherently different. So everything about that is different, right? Thinking that you need somebody, I think generalists, the ability to hire generalists who can harness this technology to do things is better. In the old days, you would have to hire somebody very specific, specialists. Today, a generalist can learn a lot of things. So that would be something I would do differently. The second thing I would do differently is go much, I think data collection. I think today the ability to capture data is greater than it ever was, but the data that you need to capture is actually quite different. There's been a lot of discussion about context graphs.
Yeah.
And, what is the actual meta workflow that you're intercepting? You're not building up an agent to do credit scoring for the mortgage. You're thinking about what's the end-to-end process to get a mortgage?
Yeah.
Right? And how would you reimagine that process? So I think reimagination today of a process is something that we didn't have the luxury of doing before. But in order to do that, you need to understand how mortgages are processed.
Yeah.
What is the credit? How does credit figure into the equation? When do people make the decisions to approve somebody with limited credit? Are there regulatory restrictions that do it? These are all like knowledge that you have to ingest and learn. You can learn it much faster because the technology is available. But the best way to do it is actually to sit inside and somehow sit on the shoulder of somebody doing it, or to talk to somebody who's an expert. So that's something I would do differently is I would go much higher up in the meta layer. Why? The why questions today mean much more, because then you can decide how to set up a flywheel to capture the data. As an example, in the mortgage process, years ago, it wouldn't have made any sense to understand why there are two people with similar credit scores and one got approved and one didn't. Nobody thought to ask the question of the person making the decision, why did you, they checked a box in a CRM, approved because of, salary history. But there's something else going on. I met with the person, they built 2 businesses before, there's some context. You can capture that context. But in order to do that, you have to build a system that can capture that context, right? Maybe it's conversational intelligence, something that has to feed in. So all those things I would reimagine completely. I would say, what's the why? How do they make those decisions and capture that? So those are things I would do differently. But all of that starts with a deep understanding. I think you've had Srisha Ramdas from Lumber on the show, and I think he did a brilliant job of this. He didn't know anything about the construction industry when he started, but he interviewed and talked to lots and lots of people and started to understand the second and third level problems that they were dealing with.
I think that the problem that he's solving is beautiful, that the same worker across 2 different counties will have 2 different payroll processes.
Correct. And may have 15 1099s because they've done 15 jobs in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And somebody's issuing those 1099s. He or she has to show up at the workplace. I mean, there's all these scheduling. So I think that's an example of something that's not a problem you could have solved in the old days of SaaS easily. It's lends itself beautifully to agentic.
So that lends itself to that the best of the founders that will start in AI era or have started, they don't need to be the most technically savvy founders. They need to understand the human aspect very well then, because if every process is going to get reimagined, then they need to do those conversations and look beyond the problems that are getting said.
I think 2 things are equally true. I think if you don't have a strong technical founder on the team, it's very difficult to build these, because as you know, pushing these agents into production is far different than building a POC. The non-technical person can build the POC and get it to look good and validate. But when it comes time to actually building something that performs reliably in production, we have all the other things: the harness, the validation, the evals, everything else that goes, governance, identity, data governance, etc. But I think the non-technical founder can do a brilliant job of deeply understanding the domain well enough to actually think about how it could be done differently. I think that's always been true, by the way, right? I think when you think about Airbnb, or you think about even WeWork, despite all the controversy, the idea that space is actually modular and can be thought of differently as an asset.
Transform the complete industry.
Yeah, and so what you then think about is in this modern context, it gets harder for founders because it's so much easier to get to V1 of a product. So how do you actually differentiate? What's the moat that and I think you have to start with an expectation of how you will build a moat. Actually, you didn't need to do that. In the old days, if you got the wedge right, you had enough time to build off the wedge and build something different. Today, I think even getting the wedge right is not a protection. You have to build the wedge in such a way that actually is a flywheel and it's sustainable, and you're operating in a world where other people don't have access to the same thing, proprietary. And so that is a much bigger challenge today for founders. And it's not easy to do. But again, that's where the non-technical founder can actually do well, is because they can actually start to understand what is they can actually think about moats that are not technical. Most of the moat is not going to be technical, unless you're a foundation model company or a world model. It's not technical.
I think we're in this era, technical founders, what I'm seeing in the portfolio and the couple of names that I discussed with you, have an edge that technical founders with deep empathy are able to outscore non-technical founders, because sometimes AI doesn't need to be sold. Where you required a strong business founder or a GTM founder, things require to be sold.
Well, it's what we talked about earlier. I think you said it as empathy, which I agree with, which goes back to some of my points about, following up and doing other things. But it's the idea of the compounding founder. So it doesn't matter whether they're technical or not. Do they have the ability to go deep, understand, ask lots of questions, listen, synthesize, and come back with a better understanding of something they didn't know anything about? That's actually completely independent. Now, technical education can often be helpful for that.
Yeah.
Can also be destructive for that. Some people cannot think except in straight lines. Big picture, they don't think that way. But the best founders can do that. And I don't think it's a barrier for a technical founder to do that. If anything, it's probably good that they're blind to some of the stuff. They're learning it.
Yeah. And right now, today, what are some of the best founders that you have invested or met that you can name, who you think will build the next Zooms of tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I'm, and most of the companies I'm getting involved with are very early stage. So, I think that there's some of the really exciting ones. There's a company founded by a founder, Ashutosh, who goes by Maddie, a company called Accelerate. And he was at Eightfold, working at Eightfold as like a chief of staff type of role. And now he's building a company that's going deep into the CIO's world, the enterprise application layer, and he's done a remarkable job of helping CIOs truly understand their business application layer. And they have Fortune 10, Fortune 25 customers, sheer hustle and providing value. And I'm very bullish on that company. I think just because of the way he thinks and the way the team is assembled, I think it's a great team. Deccan AI is another company they're more in the data AI space, which is a crowded space. And so you could easily say, there's a lot of players, but Rukesh Reddy, the founder there, is you're betting on the founder there because he truly understands the space. He's thinking all the time, and he's not the technical founder, but he understands the problem really well and what the pain is for the customer. There are Shamrock AI is another company that's thinking more deeply about the ERP transformation space, and has some incredibly strong initial traction where the customer is pulling the solution, literally pulling it out of them, and they can't even keep up because the customers is a very, very, very important company, and they're pulling the solution out of them. So these are some examples. There are others that are earlier in legal tech and other things that I believe in, but we'll see.
Got it. Coming back to moat, right? You said that technology, unless you're a foundation model, cannot be the moat. So then if you have to summarize moat for the founder listening, how do they build those moats then?
So I think that any answer I give is likely to be wrong in a year.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of pontification about moats, and if you go back and read what they said a year ago, they were saying, "Oh, you build small models, capture the data.
You focus on verticals.
Focus on verticals, and then the next day, Claude Covert comes out and they have something that attacks that vertical, or they're going to partner with some SI and they're going to build a services business around that vertical." So I think we should be careful in not overgeneralizing about what a long-term moat is. But I think most founders, if they're smart, will focus on kind of a intermediate moat, and then build off of that. And probably going to have to construct a second moat and a third moat. to me, the intermediate moat is I think three things. One is, in multi-user environments where there's, with these, when you're building these agents, if there's multi-users in a complex workflow, you then have to build an application that does it. The foundation models aren't built for that because they don't really understand persona. They don't have memory. You think they don't have memory of multiple complex and the interdependencies between those. So I actually am seeing founders, some of the better founders I see, as actually combining agentic behavior with deterministic behavior, because the interdependencies between 8-9 stakeholders who might be involved in a decision is actually something that most foundation models will do a poor job of repeatedly getting right. So if you build some deterministic, some probabilistic, and you put these things together, so multi-party, a complexity where there's different decision junctures in the end-to-end process, and ideally where the data is not visible to the foundation model. So a good example would be the CIO application, right? The Accelerate deals with an enterprise customer. They might have 1,000 internal applications. Only 100 of them are common off-the-shelf solutions. There's SAP and Salesforce. The other 900 were custom built by somebody in-house. Nobody has, Claude doesn't see it. OpenAI doesn't see it, but their business runs on it. Could be invoicing, could be payroll, it could be compliance, it could be something else. So if you're, and by the way, those things involve multiple stakeholders. It might involve AP and AR and other functions. So now if you build a solution around that, it's going to take a while before somebody's going to build a productized approach to this. Could Accenture or somebody come in and build that for the one customer? Sure. But they're not productizing well. So your opportunity is to build that and then go to other customers. And now, of course, with services models, you have to open it up for the customer to do their own thing. But by being first, multi-party, highly complex, data that's hidden from the outside world, those are three pretty good criteria for a starting point.
And would you advise the same? Because when founders get questions all the time, and I've talked to large funds, $1 billion funds, even they don't have an answer. So what if Claude comes in your portfolio or to a founder? What if Claude just, your vertical or what you do is become the focus area?
I'll give you an example of a company that I think has durability, and I think is a company that I know well through the investor. Is a company, Cecilia Zanetti is the founder and CEO of a company called GC. GC stands for General Counsel. And she comes from the world of legal general counsel. And she's selling software similar to what Harvey does with law firms. They're selling to general counsel. And I think when you get deep into what general counsel care about, the governance, the identity management, all the privacy, security, the proprietary data, mixing and matching publicly available data with private data, it's going to be quite a while before Claude Cowork solves that problem. Now, could somebody at Uber General Counsel take all those tools and build something specific to their? Sure. But the one thing we forget in Silicon Valley is we are too immersed in our own Kool-Aid. We're drinking our own Kool-Aid too much. You go out to the rest of the world, they're not even using AI. I recently came back from a trip, internationally, went to Vietnam and was talking to people there. They're not thinking about agentic AI. I don't even know what it is. So we realize that vast proportions of the world are wide open to coming up with a solution that works. If you really understand the pain, Cecilia understands because she comes from that space. So when she goes talks to a GC, she's speaking their language. Chances are somebody at Accenture going to speak to that person, or somebody who's working for Claude, if Anthropic comes up with an SI, it's going to take them a while before they can do that. So by that time, you could be at 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. Does that create an impermanent moat? Of course it doesn't. But you've built a great business. Chances are it's highly valuable. That's pretty good.
And coming to what you said, highly valuable. In Silicon Valley today, a founder who has built $100 million business in 10 years or $200 million revenue business in 10 years, they suddenly are getting questions from everywhere. Is this even valuable? Because the ceilings has become so high. Even for that founder who put, and the team who put, the investor put all to create that goal? The goalpost has moved a lot.
Yeah. I think the goalposts have moved, but not as much as sometimes people think. I think if you look at the compounded rate of growth of companies, as opposed to just the ARR number, and you see, are they actually growing? Is the compounding rate high? The companies that are doing that are getting funded. Sure, it might take 7 meetings with investors before you get a term sheet, or 12, but you're going to get a term sheet because momentum, tailwind and momentum, they're not enough. Let me say it differently. There are not enough good companies that fit into this category. If we take out all the coding and companies, which is, I think, a whole different category, and even if I then also take out CX companies, customer care, which is kind of an easy category for labor displacement. If I look at all the others, there aren't that many companies that are growing at a compound rate, have a customer base of brands that you recognize, and are actually doing something that solves a real problem. There just aren't. Scarcity principle, and there's so much capital that they're going to get the funding. So then it's just execution. It's not that they're not getting hit by Claude cowork. The questions come from investors, but the customer doesn't even know. They're not going to harness. They're not going to take Claude cowork and build something. In the rest of the U.S., there's so much market. So I think it's overstated.
And do you then also think that the entire reimagination of software category is overstated, because Silicon Valley has a narrative that the software has to become headless now because the agents will start interacting with the software layer. So thereby it's also coming to the conclusion of SaaSocalypse, that old SaaS will probably die.
I think that confuses two very different concepts. I do think the way in which software is delivered and the value it can create is radically different. And I think anybody who doesn't start out with the premise of a clean sheet of paper and thinking about how the work should be done is probably at a disadvantage. And I think so let's start with that principle and say that Silicon Valley is probably correct that this is the future. Silicon Valley overestimates how fast that future will arrive. So it's up to great founders to take advantage of this and to go out to the hinterlands of the US and Kansas and wherever else, a mid-flyover country as they call it, and educate. See, this is the thing. We live in Silicon Valley. We think everybody's educated about this.
Yeah.
The biggest opportunity for founders is to become an educator. Become the person who all the customers look to as the expert. They come to you, they ask questions. We were the experts at Solvvy in how to use AI in customer care. People came to me. In communities, I never publicized the company. I would participate actively in communities like CX support communities, and I would give advice and guidance that had nothing to do with what we were doing. And so eventually our customers were in there too. And so when someone would ask a question, hey, any good self-service tools? I had 15 customers who would come in and say, actually, you should just use Solvvy, it's the best. Yeah. But it came because I gave freely by educating. And I educated people. I was like, what is AI? Does it matter? What is machine learning? How does it actually work? 99.9% of the world does not know what agentic AI is. Become the educator. Teach your market. Whether it's a general counsel or a tax accountant or whatever, the small business accountant in Oklahoma does not know what agentic AI is. What an opportunity that is. Are they going to learn that from Claude? They're not going to learn that from Claude. They're going to learn that from you. You become an evangelist. You teach them how to use it, and you give them practical examples that go, oh my God, you telling me I can do this? You can win and win big. So you answered back to your question about SaaS apocalypse. I think the challenge is that most companies weren't built with this new paradigm in mind. I'm on the board of a couple of companies. They have great customers, they have great product, but it wasn't built for this new paradigm. Making the shift is proving to be challenging. And it's not clear to me who will and won't make it. There are trillions of dollars of enterprise value locked up in those companies, so there's a lot of incentive to do that. Salesforce has taken the lead by doing the headless thing. Most other companies haven't figured that out, and they don't know because Salesforce hasn't figured out how they're going to monetize it. Most of the other companies are so scared of how they're going to monetize it that they don't want to make the announcement. and Salesforce also has a lot of proprietary data, more so than others. So it's not for everybody. So I think SaaS apocalypse, yeah, I think it's possible. And I think the market's pricing that in. I probably overstated to some extent because some of those companies will make it, but good luck figuring out which ones will. Do you want to be the one figuring out which ones will make it?
No one wants to be the one.
Yeah. Whereas what I do see is interesting is companies like Intercom, where the founder came back in and said, this old model is going to fail. We have a good business, but it's not going to be the business of the future, and created Fin AI and has completely reworked the model and has completely come out with a fully agentic approach. And that business is doing well. So it's like two businesses in one. Or in the case of Handshake, which reinvented itself, from a SaaS company to now being an AI data company, or Turing, where I know you had Turing, Vijay from Turing on. Similar example, right? Started with one idea, but then have more. So I think so if I asked you what's the common element of those companies, it's a founder-led thing where they're able to pivot, right? And they're able to see and pivot into something that's uncomfortable. Benioff is a founder. He doesn't care. His legacy is safe. He can take chances. He can steer into the problem. That's not easy.
So you're the executive director for Funda, right? It's a very interesting name. It's a non-profit serving Indian founders in the US, right? Tell us more about the founding team. How did you build it? And who is it serving? And what the purpose?
So Funda has been one of the most pleasant surprises of my career and life. Funda is a completely not-for-profit community designed to help Indian origin founders. And that wording is important, Indian origin founders, because it's all embracing. So it covers generation of kids like my kids who've grown up here, who are still Indian origin, but may not have a connection to India per se, as well as cross-border founders who are coming over to the US, as well as veteran founders who are there. And it was started as a kind of an idea with a few serial founders of Indian origin, including Sri Shah Ramdas, who and a few others, and just getting together and thinking, okay, let's get something together and see if there's an interest. And the interest was overwhelming. So I took over as executive director last year after we had many events, and certainly, clearly there was a lot of interest. But it has just exploded. I think today we have over 2,000 founders in the community.
Sure.
I think founders have collectively raised over $3 billion.
Wow.
I think at least a dozen exits in the last few months that I know of. And if I know a dozen, then there must be another 50 that I don't know about. We do events, 7 to 8 big events a year. And we also have but the most interesting and exciting part of it is the private founder community that we have, where people are exchanging ideas, sharing best practices, learning from one another. There's an engineering sub-channel where people are talking about what's working for them technically, questions about entity formation, commission, sales structures being asked and answered by people. So it's a give and take. We also have created a CXO collective with the top CXOs in Silicon Valley. So 150 years came to our event at the consulate last year, Indian consulate in San Francisco, with several hundred more in that community. These are very senior people at companies from OpenAI to NVIDIA to Apple and Adobe. But it's all around the idea of helping founders win. So Indian origin founders, what can we do to help them with no obligations to anyone, and truly pay it forward model. And if I had to say the most exciting part of it is just how dedicated the community is. 100% voluntary organization. I don't have any staff. We do everything through volunteers. And we are, but events happen, big events. We're having an event on June 4th, and I expect 450 to 500 people. And we could easily have 1,000 if we had room. All free to everyone, thanks to a generous sponsorship by banks, venture firms, service providers, private equity. But it's non-transactional. They're there to help the community and support us. And so it's been incredibly gratifying to see what we can do. Because for me, post founding and post being at large companies and so on, I thought about what the next chapter is for me. And I kind of set an infinity goal for myself. The infinity goal that I set for myself is I want to be the single most helpful person in Silicon Valley. Yeah. I thought, how do I go about being the single? It won't be by going one-on-one. How many? And I don't have enough bandwidth. So I thought if I can do something that's just bigger and expansive and helps create a movement that can help everyone, it's a small start. Of course, the goal will never be achieved, but the idea is that you have to try to think of amplifying yourself.
Yeah.
And Funda is amplifying itself. And so we have, people like Srisha, Sandesh Mauli, who I think you've had on the program, and others who are involved. Nupur Mehta, who is a young founder herself, and she's very involved. And Anurag Nallapati, who's another founder, but they're all volunteering their time. These are busy people. But the satisfaction they get is by seeing this community come together. It's been incredibly gratifying. I think it's really it's the fourth startup in a way, and I often joke that if Funda was a startup, it would be raising a massively oversubscribed Series B, because we went from 300 founders a year ago to 2,000 in a year, and so that's something. So clearly, we're delivering value.
Yes.
The PMF is there.
Yeah.
So now we have to amplify.
With zero marketing spend.
With zero marketing spend and no staff. Yeah. I think we're the one-person startup, or the zero-person startup, that everybody keeps talking about.
How many events do you have in a year?
So we typically are doing 7 to 8 face-to-face events. Sure. We do 2 very big events, the one in June and then one in December. We do another big event, which is a CXO collective event, private only to CXOs, that we did last year at the consulate. Then we do smaller events. We did one on engineering in the age of AI with 3 great founders last month in May. Then we'll do a first gen founder event, which is the kids who've grown up here, some of them. Last year we had Kashish Gupta from High Touch, Arnav Mishra from DOS. Before the other big funding events. And so that's an event that we typically do in the fall, September. And then we do smaller events. We did a cybersecurity event with the Indian and Israeli consulates in February, where we had Jay Chaudhary, the CEO of Zscaler, spoke. So, we end up doing 7, 8 events that are either topic-based or very large.
And all events are in Bay Area?
We have a chapter in Texas that they do events, smaller events, naturally. We have members in Bangalore, and I think we'll end up doing an event in Bangalore this year, I'm sure. But given it's all volunteering, Bay Area is kind of where the epicenter is. The good news is a lot of people come from India and from other places to come to these events. So
it becomes an excuse to come to Bay Area.
Yeah, exactly. Combine it with other things and do it. So we're very pleased to have that, and the community has been great.
So we are towards, the conclusion of the podcast. You can think of last 10, 15 minutes. But would love to learn, where did the founder DNA come in you? Like, at what point of time you shifted from India to the US? What you did before becoming a founder? And your first, you spoke about the Solvvy journey. What about the other 2 journeys?
Yeah, so I'm an unusual case in that I'm what I call a 1.5 generation. My parents moved here.
Sure.
My father came here for higher education. And so we moved here when I was still in even before high school. So I New York City, grew up in New York, went to high school in public high schools, but I'm also nobody in my family had been an entrepreneur. Everybody, the expectation was engineer, doctor, lawyer. Yeah. The EDL, was the LED, or whatever, and that was what I assumed as well. I thought, I'll be a doctor, I'll be a lawyer, and I think that the entrepreneurial bug only bit me when I started to build something to like automate the complexity. And so that was for me the realization that with software you could actually automate complexity captivated me. It actually came before the idea of becoming an entrepreneur. It was more like, oh, this is really valuable. You can build something and have produce value. Oh, by the way, you can build a company on this. That came secondarily. So I think that's the genesis of it, is just getting excited about things. And one thing I realized early on for myself, and I think most founders would gravitate towards this, is that working for someone else is constraining. That you don't have that expansiveness being able to do what you think. You have that freedom. And so a lot of it is the constraints that large companies impose on you. When I was a CTO at Thomson Reuters, you had a lot of other stakeholders. You're worrying about big numbers of employees, a lot of bureaucracy, administration. I hated that. I love 0 to 1. And so where do you get opportunity to do 0 to 1? Rarely do you get that in bigger companies. 0 to 1 is best when you're actually building. And you're working with people who you get to know and work shoulder to shoulder with. So that has been the attraction. And so, being the first in the family to be an entrepreneur was a great thing. But, I had inspiration. I had a grandfather who had a second career after he was 75 and wrote 3 books after the age of between 75 and 93, and became a well-known music critic and writing in the Indian Express. So, I had inspiration. Sure. It just wasn't entrepreneurial inspiration.
And at what age you started your first company?
28, 29.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't 20. These days it's 18. So, it's like drop out of college. I don't think that would have been.
And that was acquired by Thomson Reuters.
Yeah.
After how many years?
That was a fast one. It's like 18 months.
Okay. And then you worked at Thomson Reuters for how many years?
For about 1.5 years.
Okay. And then you started the second one?
Yeah. Then moved out here to the Bay Area and
so then
GlobalEnglish.
They were all built in New York?
Yeah, I was in the East Coast, yes. And then Thomson moved me to Florida.
Okay.
They did a roll-up, and I was the CTO of the roll-up.
Understood.
Yeah. And then moved out here, and then GlobalEnglish was the second company.
And you built it for 5 years, GlobalEnglish?
No, GlobalEnglish was a long journey. So my joke is that, I thought it was going to be easy, and, it took 11 years.
Wow.
Because we were so far ahead of the market. I mean,
you started that in 2001 and got acquired in 2012.
Yeah, exactly. So it took 11 years. And the company actually was incorporated even earlier than that. Yeah. We were doing consumer. And so, the idea was when I joined, I had to kind of redo it around corporate English learning. And so that was.
And if you can share, what scale do you took each company at, and roughly how much funding you had raised in each company?
Well, the first one was all friends and family, and it was, single digit million, but we had all of our destiny in our own hand. With GlobalEnglish, when we exited, we were somewhere around 65 million. We had 450 of the Global 2000 as customers. So companies like IBM, HP, GSK.
You're teaching their employees English.
Yeah, exactly. And focus. I think IBM at one time had 220,000 IBMers using the GlobalEnglish platform. I think we ended up with, last year we had probably, we ended up with, well over 10 million people who used our platform to learn English. So it was a pretty powerful concept. But we also had customers all around the world. So most of what was interesting about GlobalEnglish was the buyers were often in the US or in Europe, but the users were almost always in developing markets. So we had offices in 22 countries, China, Brazil, India, where the users were actually distributed. So IBM headquarters would make the purchase, but all the users were abroad. So, and then once we're in Pearson, part of a much larger $1 billion business unit focused on English language education. I was part of the executive team there, stayed for 2 years, and then started Solvvy. Solvvy, we were very lean. We got to 8-digit ARR. We launched a product in 17. We exited obviously early 22. We were, 67 or 68 people when we exited the company. We were super lean. I didn't even have a VP of finance, didn't have a CFO, didn't have a general counsel. We did all of that through the team we had. So built a very strong leadership team that could do many things at once.
Yes.
My COO handled legal, finance, some marketing, board deck, strategy. So I like people who are polymaths and who can handle multiple things at once. And that's what allowed us to stay lean. And I think our biggest competitor raised 7 times as much as us. We were venture backed with Scale Ventures. Rory O'Driscoll was on my board. True Ventures had led the earlier round. Pear, I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So we had great investors, but our competitors raised 7-8 times as much.
Wow. And you were still able to make a dent.
Yeah. And we were equal to them in revenue and we were beating them on deals. Yeah. So that's how you control. I always say this to founders is don't think that funding events are not high signal unless you turn them into high signal. and you control your own destiny a lot better when you are able to do it without a lot of funding, because you don't have as many people to answer to.
And in the Solvvy journey, it was exceptional that you had more than 1 billion conversations across all these customers, like Amazon.
Yeah. Again, because we learned early on that the focus should be on customers that had a lot of volume, which meant they had a lot of agents, which meant they had a lot of repetitive issues. AI is perfect. I mean, I look at what Decagon and Sierra and all these other guys are doing now, and I think we saw this coming. Yeah. We just didn't have the technology foundation of what the foundation models have built. Right? We didn't have Anthropic and OpenAI and others building, but the problem statement hasn't changed.
I imagine that if Zoom wouldn't have given you the offer, today Solvvy would have been a 9-digit ARR company.
I think so, but I think we would have had to re-platform.
Yeah.
Which would not have been easy, but we would have done it because we would have realized we saw what was coming. So we would have required a pivot and a redoing. I think what Intercom did, as I said, with Finn is exactly what we would have had to do, and we would have done it.
Yeah.
And maybe we would have gone more to the agent side earlier, as soon as we saw that. So, which we did, Zoom did, and we did at Zoom. But hindsight's always 20/20. Yeah. I think I don't look back. It's like what I love is that we understood the space really well, and it just so happened that the technology wasn't ready. But I think if you deeply understand the problem space and you build a great solution and it has a good outcome,
probably you made the customers ready for an completely autonomous agent.
Yeah, but I don't regret that. You build the right thing for the right time. You can only build what's available.
Yes.
Mobile came along and made app economy possible.
Yeah.
So had you built a great product and that could have been a great app before mobile became ubiquitous, it doesn't mean that you weren't a great founder. It just meant your timing wasn't right.
Yeah. And founders usually struggle when during the process of acquisition many LOIs get dropped. What are some of your learnings, because now you have done it 3 times back to back? Right? How to take an LOI to a successful conclusion, which is win-win for everyone. And first is how to even get a LOI.
Yeah, I think first of all, anytime I meet a founder, she says, who starts talking in an early conversation about potential acquirers, I tune out.
Yeah.
I think, the old thing is so true. The single biggest thing is companies are bought, not sold.
Yeah.
And if you start out with the idea that you're going to get acquired, it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
You just can't build for that. First of all, you'll end up building a bad company that nobody wants to acquire. So I think the biggest thing is be known in your ecosystem, know who else is in your ecosystem, build relationships and partnerships, so that at the time, if you are in a process or something, you know who to call. But some of them are your competitors too. You want to beat them. Just because somebody is in your space and you can have cordial relationships with them, but you want to build a company that can beat them. That's what's going to attract them most. If you're actually, I always say, if you're actually hurting a company or you're filling a gap that they're not filling with their customers, it's the best time, because then they know they need you. So I think, between an LOI and an acquisition, I think it varies dramatically with company to company. The one thing I would say to founders is look out for your employees. Because chances are, especially for a lot of young founders, they're going to work with these people again. Yeah. And so treat them really well. Treat them better than you treat yourself. Yeah. Advocate for them. Make sure that the acquirer treats them well, that things are done. Even more so than your investors. Your investors are going to be fine, but your employees are going to be with you for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can build something else with them. And I think most founders know that, but they don't know what the specifics of that mean.
Sure.
So what does that mean? Retention period, investing, how they get paid out, all these things, you should agonize about it, more so than yourself.
Got it.
Fight for it, negotiate, because you only get the one chance when you're negotiating.
So did in third case of Solvvy, did Zoom hear about, because you were trying to sell it to them, or was it's a huge
No,
gap?
I don't know that I never actually asked the question, but they did. The chief customer officer at Zoom, we had pitched to him.
Yeah.
So he knew, Nick Chong, and they had obviously done a scan of the CX AI space. So I think, the corp dev people knew about us. So I think it's all of those things together. I think the best thing in a company is, in most acquirers, is that multiple people know you. But the one thing I would say is that it's not enough if corp dev knows you. Unless there's a burning fire, the line of business has to know you.
Yeah, because the process of acquisitions can be very distracting for a founder and their team.
Yeah. In all the cases, I don't think it's a very small number of people knew.
Okay.
Because you don't want. This is one of the few cases where radical transparency doesn't work. It's because it's distracting and people start to wonder, what does it mean for me? And you don't actually know the answer, so there's no point in giving them radical transparency when you don't actually know. So my advice to founders is keep the circle very tight until you absolutely have to tell people. If you have a signed LOI and it's actually now you're going to do diligence and people have to be involved, you need to tell your employees. But even then, you have to be very careful in what you tell them. Is that the likelihood that it may not happen, it may not close. Things can happen. We have to execute our business. Customers come first. So I think most founders know that. I think the tendency is not to tell everybody in the world. Don't get too excited. Sometimes it doesn't happen, right? I've not had that situation, but it happens all the time where a deal collapses for different reasons. Particularly with public companies, if they're acquirers and if they're using stock, the market could dictate, something else could come along, gyrations that are independent, agnostic of the company. So I think when we were going through the Solvvy process with Zoom, I think another wave of COVID hit. So there was also existential risk of that, like extraneous risk. But fortunately, it all went through smoothly.
And at that point of time, like Zoom was doing remarkably well on the stock market in 2021.
Actually, I think by that time, I think it had slowed down. I think by 22. So actually, the market had priced Zoom differently.
Yeah.
So no, this was post the mega run of Zoom. And I think now it's gone back up because of various factors that you probably know. Stock has done remarkably well in the last 6 months. But I think we didn't see that huge run up that they had between 2020 and 2022. Because we were after that. Mid 2022, it had already
priced
come back.
By the market.
Yeah.
Got it. So Mahesh, in your journey of, let's say you shared various lessons during your journey. You shared radical transparency built with the team. You shared going openly with customers, not selling them, prior to educate as much as you can. Your job as a founder is to be the chief education officer rather than the chief sales officer. Right? And ask, don't be fixated on a problem. Ask customers what are the problems that are dear to them, that they are trying to solve. That's what you did at Solvvy, right? That's how you observed that Cloudflare is not the right way to go, whereas solving for the end consumer is for the companies.
We actually did a commercial at GlobalEnglish about this. We said, and the whole premise of it was a product pitch. It was like an animation, but the whole idea was, we kind of made it that our persona buyer, what would it take to get them into the corner office to become customer officer of the company? And so we kind of built that. And so we built it around the idea that the person we're selling to, our job is to get them promoted.
Yeah.
And if you think about it from that perspective, it's actually a very liberating way to think about it. If my job, you're the customer, my job is to ensure that you are celebrated, promoted, made to look like a hero or a heroine, I have done something right. It's actually a great way to think about it. And it never fails. So in the case of, we're going to HelloFresh, thinking about, okay, if they can go, instead of going from 1,000 agents to 2,500, and they can, but they have the budget for 2,000, but we can save them that, they're going to look great. CFO is going to love them. So I think that's the other thing, is just keep thinking about, put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Why they're taking a risk on you? How are you going to reward their risk? What's their reward risk, and how can you maximize that? And then when you get a few of those, celebrate those wins and have them be your advocates to the others. Because then they're in a position of saying, I adopted Solvvy, it did these things, it's great, this team will make you successful. That's what buyers want to hear, right? They don't want to hear about the tech and all. They'll learn about those things. But if they know that it works and that it's going to get them promoted or make them look good, you got a meeting.
Yeah, that's what is said in enterprise software. Even the CXO that you are selling to, you only become successful if they get promoted for implementing you.
Correct. Yeah, and so people talk about champions and all these other things. It's like, yes, people have self-interest, and it's okay to lean into the self-interest.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mahesh. I had a wonderful discussion. I learned so much during the conversation. Grateful to you for doing this.
I appreciate the time, and I hope that anytime we can help founders, that's, like I said, I want to be as helpful to as many people as I can. And so this is a great forum. I think what you guys are doing with the podcast is fun. I've listened to a number of the episodes and learned a lot myself. So
which ones have been your favorite? We'll try to reach that kind of a bar with every episode.
Yeah, I think, I listened to Srisha's one, of course.
That's one of my favorites.
And then I listened to the gentleman who was at Cloudflare. And,
Manish.
Yeah. And I love that one. I thought he had some incisive points, more from the go-to-market side. I thought those were some really good ones. So those are two that I liked. But I'll go back and listen to more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.